welcome to Astrology of DC. And I'm just going to do part one, the Justice League, and this won't even be the whole Justice League. I just picked four of the members. And yeah, so I did Marvel about a week ago. So if you haven't seen that video, go back there and check that out. But yeah, you know what? Growing up in the 70s and 80s, DC really had their stuff together. I mean, they had the big budget movies like the Superman movies and the Batman movies, and that was pretty much it. But then all of a sudden in the 90s, they just kind of went, "Nyeh," and then Marvel started taking over. And really, there wasn't anything Marvel related other than X-Men, at least out in the movie scene. So I don't know what the heck happened to DC, and I just don't understand why they just can't get it together in this decade. So here's hoping that they're able to move on. So anyway, let's start out with Henry Cavill as Superman. Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do like the classic Superman, but I'm going to like Christopher Reeve, but I'm going to just stick to the ones that are in the modern the modern Justice League movie. So Henry Cavill is Superman, who I think came on with the first with the Man of Steel reboot. All right, so Henry Cavill, let's see, born in England. So the first thing I noticed right off the bat is the Sun and Mars together. Exalted Sun with a Mars that's in a Mul Tricone sign, and Mul Tricone means it's in its own sign. This is very powerful for individualism, getting stuff done, and usually people in the military have this combination. Commanders, generals, people that like to lead, people that are large and in charge, which is also not necessarily large and in charge, but just in charge. Large and in charge is just kind of like Leo. Leo is more of just a large, not necessarily in charge. But anyway, that's just one of the qualities of the fire signs. Retrograde Mercury here. This is retrograde in the sign of Taurus. Now, check this out. Venus and Rahu are conjunct here in the 6th house. So don't have an exact... Oh, wait, no, this is actually it. This is his ascendant. So we do have a birth time for Henry Cavill, who is a, let's see, a Capricorn ascendant with the moon in the 1st house. Interesting. So right here, this makes relationships with money and women kind of difficult. So Venus, and I know I point to like people that have difficult relationships, and whenever you see Venus conjunct a malefic planet, or if it's in the 6th or 8th house, it makes relationships difficult. However, Venus in the 8th house in Vedic astrology doesn't mean Venus is weak or it's a weak placement. It's actually that it gains strength in the 8th house too. Venus in the 8th house makes relationships unexpected, uninteresting. Things come out of nowhere. I think actually I should change my mind. They actually are very interesting, but not in a good way. Now here in the 6th house with the south node of the moon here, actually no, that's the north node of the moon in the sign of Gemini. This makes Venus act as accruing excessive debt through women. When you see Venus in the 6th house in a man's chart, it shows somebody that likes to spend a lot of money on their women, or they may have women in their lives that spend a lot of money. So I'm sure Henry Cavill, if he's not single, is whenever he does decide to get married or get into some sort of relationship, that woman's either going to burn a hole in his pocket or he could lose it through divorce. Divorce is actually a little bit more indicated through the 8th house, but this shows like legal ramifications through women. And of course, anything Venus related to in the 6th house. Other things, Saturn here is retrograde. It's also exalted here in the sign of Libra. Like I said, retrograde Saturn and its sign of exaltation doesn't necessarily mean it's debilitated. This opposes the Sun and Mars. So this is in the 10th house though. So this shows somebody that really works hard to get where they are. And then if we take a look at where Saturn is placed in the Levamsa chart, you can kind of see it down there in the sign of, what is it? That's the sign of Scorpio. Saturn probably doesn't work the best in Henry Cavill's chart. So this can actually show somebody that doesn't want to work very hard. So, good Saturn placement, but that retrograde makes it operate differently. Jupiter and Uranus conjunct here in the sign of Scorpio. Man, this is a lot of somebody that really knows how to get to the bottom of mysteries and things like that. Also too, there's a slight interest in the occult. Also too, with Neptune conjunct the south node of the moon, that's a little bit of that spiritual flavor, especially being here in the 12th house. So this is somebody, Henry Cavill is somebody who has a lot of spiritual powers, but generally what happens is they tend to be a little bit too spiritual. So one of the karmic lessons of somebody that has a south node in the 12th house is to look to the north node and then the north node in the 6th house, and it actually forces them to become more materialistic. And I know that sounds a little bit counterproductive, but in a past life, somebody could have overly focused on like being a renunciant, being a monk, spending a life in isolation, or maybe possibly in prison. And so, since they've already experienced that, the north node of the moon is pushing them toward materialism, which has its own, how do I put it? It has its own spiritual concept in the Hindu religion. All right, Gal Gadot is Wonder Woman, who was born in Israel. I have an accurate birth time for her. So she is a Cancer ascendant here with the moon here in the sign of Leo in the second house. So this shows somebody that is very good at using their voice. And this is good for like stage acting, singing, using your voice to command attention. So what you do is you take the meaning of the sign and the planet in the house, and you put them all together, and you can kind of piece together. So we have moon, which is basically emotions and things like that, in the second house of voice in the sign of Leo, which is really about gaining attention. So use his voice to gain emotional attention. That's basic astrological vocabulary. Let's see. Sun, ooh, her sun is exalted too, and it's conjunct the north node of the moon, and this is in the 10th house of career. Very good for career. And if we take a look, she's in her moon dasha, actually soon to be in her Mars dasha. Actually, don't see this too often. So moon dasha is going to be really all about gaining money, and moon's in the second house. And then if you ever want to know how the sublord functions, which is like a moon Saturn, moon Jupiter, you look at its position relative to the Mahadasha lord, and that'll kind of tell you. So like moon Jupiter, Jupiter's 6 houses away from the moon, so that's going to mean expansion of debts and possibly work, maybe some trouble from enemies or litigation. So that's how I generally put it together. Let's see, other stuff, fixed stars, don't see anything major there. Jupiter's actually debilitated in her chart, so that's a little bit difficult. Debilitated Jupiter doesn't make somebody they don't really adhere to their morals very well. Jupiter's all about morals, it's about your ethics and things like that. Now, this is very fascinating. She has an exalted Venus conjunct a debilitated Mercury. This is all about emotion. And I mean, so Gal Gadot really emotes a lot. She's a very emotional person. She operates very emotionally on the inside. So that's what you get when you get this exalted, debilitated combination. Other than that, yeah, Mars is okay placed here in the sign of Taurus. That's kind of a neutral placement for Mars as far as I'm concerned. Okay, Ben Affleck, for some reason, is Batman, and when they cast this guy as Batman, I did not understand it because I was used to the Christopher Nolan movies. Hi, my name's Batman, bro, I'm smoking too much. I'm sure you've seen it from with The Dark Knight. So anyway, going to Ben's chart, one of the things that sticks out to me about Ben Affleck is he has a planet conjunct the ascendant. And by conjunct, it can be in the first house, which is the whole sign in Vedic astrology. But for him, it's about, 2 degrees away from the ascendant. So it really functions like a conjunction. Venus conjunct the ascendant is extremely good for prosperity, acting, anything Venus related. All the good stuff in life, all the material desires really get manifested with this placement. And then also, too, if you look at Rahu conjunct the ascendant, it has a similar effect. Let's see, K2 Mercury in the Sun here in the second house. This is, so we're talking about speech here, and a retrograde Mercury conjunct here. This can actually show a speech impediment to some people. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ben Affleck got into acting to kind of overcome some issues that he had with his speech. I've seen people that have stuttering problems actually have a K2 Mercury conjunction, especially in the second house here. It shows difficulty, too, with communication, especially communicating emotions. So if we take what Cancer stands for, I was going to say significator, and put all this stuff together, it also shows like the sun here is in Sandhi, which means it's like right on the border here of Cancer and what is the other side? Leo. And so that makes the expression of the ego a little bit difficult too. It kind of gets wrapped up in emotion. And so here in the sun also, just to be specific, so this rules the third house too. So Mars here is in the sign of Leo, and of course Mars being in the sign of Leo denotes very high intelligence. Actually no, Mars in the third house. Leo too can show somebody that likes to express their intelligence through acting or through some sort of egotistical pursuit. But Mars is actually in Vedic astrology one of the main significators of intelligence, and I always thought it was Mercury. Mercury is part of like how we process information and things like that, but Mars really is an expression of intelligence. It's also too because it also natively rules this third house. So this is very good for somebody that really likes to have intellectual pursuits. Let's see, other placements. So the moon here is, it's okay placed here in the sign of Libra in the 5th house. You show somebody that would have good relationship with their children, or at least a daughter. Let's see, Jupiter here in Sagittarius retrograde. This shows somebody that has, when it comes to relationships, kind of like a Sagittarius, they tend to idealize relationships, or maybe over idealize them. And so what they'll do is, with Jupiter here, they'll throw their ethics out the window for a relationship. Kind of an interesting way how it functions. Rahu here in the 8th house can show sudden gains and losses just like out of nowhere. That's kind of one of the interesting placements about Rahu. If it's in the 8th house, you can expect the unexpected, and maybe you can't even expect that, okay? And then Saturn here in the 12th house in the sign of Taurus. He probably sleeps very well. And also, too, what this does is it, Saturn in the 10th house kind of puts a damper on endings. So it's very difficult to bring things to a close for Ben Affleck. And we can kind of look at the, let's see, what Saturn rules here, because it brings that kind of influence into the houses, or the houses it rules brings it into focus here in the 12th house. So we have the 9th and 8th house, 8th and 9th house. And so what this is going to mean is it's any sudden surprises that come as a result of his passion in Rahu are very difficult for him to put a close to. So he'll start a lot of stuff. He'll keep doing things over and over and over again because of this Rahu influence, but he can't seem to get the discipline to kind of close this stuff. So Ben Affleck, I think he's been producer on some of the stuff, and I think some of his projects tend to take a very long time. Other than that, though, he's got a fairly average chart, except for Venus being conjunct the ascendant. Moving on. Okay, Jason Momoa is Aquaman, the laziest villain. At least if you saw the cartoons, Fish did all his work, and he's lazy. He'd all be like, some dolphin would come and make him a sandwich or something like that. But he's pretty, he's pretty ripped there. So I think he's capable of taking care of the Van Cams, which is a fish, by the way. All right, moving on. So I don't have an exact birth time for him, so we're going to go with the moon being in Libra as his first house. He could also be a Virgo here, but I'm just going to go with Libra. Let's see, other placements. Venus, Mercury, Sun, and Jupiter, all in the sign of Cancer. Wow. That is really kind of like the center of, this is his 10th house, so this really reflects his career. This man is very, very caring, very clingy, probably expresses a lot of his personality through his career is expressed in a Cancerian way. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, which doesn't make him like a girly man, but he's just very, he's very into empathy, things like that. And so, yeah, this makes this a very heavy water sign. It's also, too, though, the ruler of the sign of Libra here is in the 10th house. So this is really a huge part of his personality, especially the sun there. Other than that, he's also got a fairly average chart. Retrograde Mercury here. Of course, somebody that thinks differently, thinks out of the box. And then Rahu and Saturn here are conjunct in the, conjunct in the 11th house. This is actually a frustrating combination because Rahu really wants you to go, 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 passion, do it now. Saturn's like, nope. And when it's in the sign of Leo, this is very difficult, especially when it comes to making friends in the network circles, because that's really what the 11th house is all about, right? And so when you have these conflicting energies, it's like, oh man, I really got to go out and make friends. But I can't because I feel like here. So if we're going to look at what this is representing, this is about the sun. Leo's about the ego, and this is in the sign of Cancer. So this shows somebody that doesn't feel like they're good enough for other people. But of course, what we do is if we look at the take a look at the Devamsa chart, since he was born in 1979, the stuff tends to relieve itself after after the age of 36, I believe. So you take a look, and his sun is actually in the sign of Scorpio, which kind of helps that ego expression a little bit. That's also conjunct his retrograde Mercury. So yeah, and then also too, his Venus is let's see, that's debilitated too in his Navamsa chart. So once again, going back to Venus, it usually means trouble with the relationships, or maybe he's too picky too. I mean, that's kind of one of the functions of Venus and Virgo is Venus is all about expression, trying to have the best of things. When we put in Virgo, it's very picky, and so they tend to nitpick details and stuff like that. Looking at his Dasha period, now he's going into his Mercury Dasha, which is good. Actually, no, I'm sorry, he's been in his Mercury Dasha since 2010, but he's going into his Mercury Moon Dasha, which as you can see is the first lord, and then this is also in the 10th house. So this is really about career and career expansion. So Hey, I hope you enjoyed the DC Universe. Stay tuned tomorrow. I will do the rest of the Justice League and maybe throw in a couple of classics like Christopher Reeve. Let's see, who was the original Wonder Woman? I forgot her name. The lady that spun around in the 70s. Linda Carter. See, that's my mnemonic device to remember Linda Carter. People are like, what the hell are you doing? All right, so I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you tomorrow for more of the Justice League. DC, but I'll focus on Justice.